protect yourselves. وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا, and your family, the fire. Protect yourselves and your family from the fire. Right. This is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's rewind. What are we protecting ourselves from? Why are we protecting ourselves? What is the point of protecting ourselves? What benefit may we learn or benefit may we gain by protecting ourselves? What does it mean to protect yourself? When we say ittaqillah, it's the same root verb. It's from taqwa, from waqa. So the waw has been changed to a ta. The waw has been changed to a ta. The origin of it is ايش؟ الأصل if وقلة. هذا الأصل. افتعل يعني. The origin of it is iwtaqillah. هذا الأصل. iwtaqillah. الواو حذفت وأبدل تاء. And it became ittaqillah. And the masdar is taqwa. So the point that we're trying to make, though we're understanding the word, is that wiqaya, or is a form, is like when you use a shield. Right? To shield yourself from a strike with a sword. Or it's what you use when you use a helmet to protect your head from damage when you fall off of a bike. Right? This is wiqaya. There's an Arabic saying that says, al-wiqayatu khayrun min al-ilaj. Prevention is better than cure. So you're preventing yourself from the punishment of Allah, or from what causes you to be punished by Allah. A command from Allah Azza wa Jal, qu anfusakum. The actuality of taqwa, haqiqat al-taqwa, is to refrain from haram. You refrain from haram. And fulfill all the wajibat. So refrain from anything that's forbidden. Fulfilling all things that are obligatory. The things that are obligatory for you. Some of them are the same, and others are different from the things that are obligatory for you, for me, for him. Why? Because each of our situations is different from the other. Some of us have parents that are still alive, others don't. Some of us are young and salah is not an obligation, others are old enough for the salah to be an obligation. Some of us have jobs, others don't. Some of us are married, others aren't. Some of us have children, others aren't. Some of us who have children, our children are older, no longer dependent upon us. Others have young children. Right? So each and every one of us have different responsibilities, different wajibat. Right? So the taqwa is going back to, because taqwa, you're protecting yourself. So it's two things. It is refraining from haram. And I put first refraining from haram, abstaining from haram first, because it is more important. The Prophet ﷺ said, مَا نَهَيْتُكُمْ عَنْهُ فَاجْتَنِبُوهُ. Whatever I have forbid you from doing, avoid. Stay away from. Right? It's easy to stop. Right? All you have to do is just stop. Of course, there's the desire, there's the hawa, and there's the shaitan that entices you, and so on and so forth. But stopping is a lot easier than fulfilling a task. Right? Stopping, right? Abstaining from doing something is a lot easier than actually fulfilling a task. Because not everyone has the same ability. Not everyone has the same talent or background or practice. Not everyone's the same. So fulfilling a task is much more difficult than abstaining from doing anything. So the Prophet ﷺ said, ما نهيتكم عنه فاجتنبوه وما أمرتكم به فافعلوا منه ما استطعتم. And what I have commanded you to do from it that which you can, that which you are able. So taqwa revolves around two main things: refraining from haram, abstaining from haram. And haram is anything, whether it may be an action, whether it may be a product, whether it may be something that you indulge in, where the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is connected with doing it. And the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ajr, is connected with refraining or staying away from it. So if you do it, you're in sin. If you stay away from it, you have ajr. Hadith Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَتَبَ الْحَسَنَاتِ وَالسَّيِّئَاتِ ثُمَّ بَيَّنَ ذَلِكَ. That indeed Allah wrote the good and bad deeds, and then He made that manifest, what those are. فَمَنْ هَمَّ بِحَسَنَةٍ, whoever tries to do a good deed and is not able to do it, will have a good deed. And then whoever tries to do a good deed and then is able to do it will have 10 good deeds until it's multiplied by 700, until it's multiplied by even more than that. And whoever attempts to do a bad deed and then refrains from doing it will have a good deed, one good deed written. Whoever attempts to do a bad deed and then eventually does that bad deed, then they will have one bad deed written in their slate. So a sin or something that is forbidden, that Allah and His Messenger have forbidden, staying away from it is the first pillar of taqwa. The first pillar of protecting yourself from Allah's punishment. The second pillar is to do the things that Allah has deemed incumbent, deemed wajib. Now one may say, how do I know what those things are? You start with what's most important, and then you follow that up with what comes after. So the most important is tawheed. Nothing more important than tawheed. The most important is your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your connection with Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Should be unfiltered, unchanged. No one in between. Right? Nothing that you call upon to get you close to Allah except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used to make dua, وَنَعُوذُ بِكَ مِنْكَ لَا نُحْصِي ثَنَاءً عَلَيْكَ. We seek refuge with you, from you. So our protection is through you, from you. And the best example that we can understand, or that helps us understand this concept, is the relationship a father has with his child. Right? So a father both rewards and punishes his child. The punishment that the father has, or the father makes of the child, or to the child, is a punishment so that child can do better. So that child, when he's afraid of his father, the only refuge the child has is to run to his father. The only refuge that child has is to run to his father, because his father has usually a soft heart towards that child. So, on the same note, I mean, of course, there's nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى. We run from Allah to Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَفِرُّوا إِلَى اللَّهِ. Run to Allah. Flee to Allah. Right? So we run from Allah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how do we do that? By doing the second pillar, we fulfill the wajibat. And the most important is tawheed. Nothing between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You run towards Allah. And of course the 5 salawat. And in these 5 salawat are secrets that we continue to uncover as we continue to live and continue to practice. Each and every one of us finds their own secrets in their salah, finds their own connection, finds their own line of communication to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the salah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ. Seek assistance in patience and in salah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ. And it is a grand thing or something that is difficult except for those who have khushu'. And of course you have your zakat, and you have your sawm, that is for everyone, and you have your hajj, and then you have obligations that are upon you based on your situation. As mentioned before, if you're married, you're making sure that you're fulfilling the rights of your wife. If you have children, you're fulfilling the rights of your children, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sa'ilukum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to question us. The Prophet ﷺ said, كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. Each and every one of you is a shepherd and is responsible for their herd. Everyone is a shepherd and responsible for their herd. So any responsibility that you've taken on, you're held accountable for amam Allah, in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are the pillars of taqwa. Refraining, abstaining from haram, and fulfilling the wajibat. Now, what fortifies and strengthens your ability to avoid the muharramat, what strengthens that ability is to avoid the makruhat, the things that are disliked. And even avoiding a lot of mubahat, a lot of things that are permissible. Right? Why? Because you're afraid of falling into haram. This strengthens your ability to abstain from haram. What? That you're avoiding the makruhat as an addition. And you're avoiding even the mubahat because you're afraid of falling into haram. One of the scholars of modern day, he got sick a little bit, and his family, his wife, made him some orange juice, squeezed him some fresh orange juice, right? So he drank orange juice to, kind of build up his vitamin C, his immune system for a couple of days, and he started to like it, right? He started to enjoy his orange juice, and he started to get better. And then it came a day, just a couple of days later, a few days later, he said, you know what? I better stop drinking this orange juice. Because today, it's orange juice. Tomorrow, it's cigarettes. And Allah knows what comes thereafter. So he stopped drinking the orange juice because he was afraid of committing something haram, right, thereafter, because he's enjoying life too much. And this may be an extreme example. However, each person knows themselves. And each person knows what their triggers are. Because something that is makruh could be a trigger to something haram, and you know it. So avoiding that trigger helps you avoid the haram thing. And the trigger could be something that is mubah. You may be watching a soccer game, and there's a certain trigger that is associated with soccer that makes you think about doing something haram, and you're encouraged to do something haram. Na'udhu billah. And what strengthens your ability to fulfill your wajibat is to look at the wajibat, the obligatory actions, the things that are incumbent upon you, and based on those things, you fulfill extra mustahabbat. So for example, you have to make the 5 salawat. With those 5 salawat, pray the extra sunnah. 2 before Fajr, which the Prophet ﷺ never left. 2 before Dhuhr and 4 after. 2 after Maghrib and 2 after Isha. These are 12 a day. Whoever does these, as the Prophet ﷺ said, will be built a house in Jannah. Right? There's also the salawat at night. There's also salat al-duha. Right? With fasting, for example, which is another obligation. You fast Mondays and Thursdays, 3 days out of the month. Right? Fasting the day of Ashura, fasting the day of Arafat. All of these would assist you to fulfill your wajib, because you're used to fasting. Fasting on Ramadan is easy. And likewise, Umrah and Hajj. And likewise, even giving charity. Zakat is obligatory upon you, but you're used to giving every week or every month. So now when it comes time to give zakat, it's not a burden. Right? You have to provide for your family, for example. Give them food and drink and housing and clothing. There's the bare minimum. If you're only doing bare minimum, you're getting used to being stingy. But if you add to that a little bit, you're getting used to, it's easy for you to provide for them, and so on and so forth. Doing the mustahabbat help you and assist you and strengthen your ability to fulfill the wajibat. And this is the essence of that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يقول وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. And this is a benefit, a perk, so to speak, to having taqwa. The ayah translates to, whoever has taqwa, Allah will give them an out and provide for them from avenues they perceived not. Number one, you will get an out. Number two, you will be given provisions from places you never thought provisions would come. These are two benefits that are mentioned in this ayah of taqwa. So, based on these two provisions, all of you are likely familiar with the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. And I'd like to mention an example of taqwa exercised by Yusuf alayhi salam, and an example of these two benefits or perks to taqwa that Allah mentions from the story of Yusuf alayhi salam in this particular form of exercising taqwa. So you're familiar when when Yusuf alayhi salam was sold as a slave and was serving in his master's home. And Yusuf alayhi salam was quite handsome as a young man, to the point that the wife of his master wanted him for herself. Yusuf alayhi salam knew that indulging in this type of activity is haram. So Yusuf alayhi salam did his best to avoid it, even though the situation or the scenario in which he was tested had very few consequences, meaning in this life. So he was a slave, and the behavior of slaves is disregarded. He was in his master's home. His master was nowhere to be seen, and it was only his master's wife. And there's no one around, and the doors are closed. So it's highly unlikely that anyone would ever hear about it. He's a young man. And when young men do things, it's forgiven usually. Nobody, thinks much of it. People usually overlook it. And he has the strength and he has the desire. There's nothing stopping him. At the same time, this woman is beautiful. And she's prepared everything for him. At the end of the day, he could just say, she forced me to do it. Even though all of these factors were inviting him to commit something that was a major sin, that was haram, Yusuf alayhi salam, because he feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he didn't do it. He had taqwa. He exercised taqwa. Right. Remember the two perks. يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. Yusuf, right after this, alayhi salam, was tested even further. He was accused of attempted rape. He was eventually thrown in jail, and He was there for years on end. It was a catastrophe. What happened to he will give them an out and he will provide them from places they perceive not? The lesson is be patient. You did your part, as Yusuf alayhi salam did. Now you're being tested to see if you will continue to stay strong, continue to be steadfast on the truth, as Yusuf alayhi salam was. The promise of Allah is true even if it comes later on. Allah never breaks a promise. As long as you do your part, Allah never breaks His promise. Yusuf was given an out. He was able to come out of jail with complete immunity. Yusuf alayhi salam was declared absolutely innocent. And his record was expunged as if he never did anything. Did Allah give him an out? Yes, He gave him an out. What about providing him from places he perceived not? Who would have ever thought that this enslaved boy that's cut off from his family for years on end and now was in prison for years and forgotten would eventually become the king of Misr, the king of Egypt, alayhi salam. Allah provided him from a place where he perceived not. And this is the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the question is, where are we with taqwa? Where are we? When no one is around and it's just you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what do you do? When the opportunity and the factors are enticing, everything is set up just right for you to be able to commit this sin and get away with it. Nobody's around, it's fine. What do you do? If you exercise taqwa, know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless you. He will give you more than you expected. The promise of Allah is true. قال الله تعالى إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. The most honorable of you are those who have the most piety or taqwa. Indeed, Allah is all-knowing and well-aware. جعلني الله وإياكم من المتقين إنه على كل شيء قدير وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا